Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chuchu Blema Sunny podcast with me, Kabuki Akumi, aka Bookie. I hope you guys are having an awesome week. It is the evening before independence, and by this time, Nkrumah was sitting on a bad boy piece of information. This year's theme is reflect, review, and reset. And the celebration is going to be held at the Jubilee House because President Mahama wants to cut back on government spending on account of our economy being in the gutter. Now, this new government has made us a lot of promises, and I can only hope that they're able to see these promises through, help improve our economy. We can get better education, better hospital, better roads, constant electricity and flowing water, the stop of galamsey, and a better and more organized structure for our agricultural sector. I can only hope. Ghana is such a beautiful and lovely country. I want to be able to travel. I have wanderlust, but I also want to be able to come back here whenever I want because this is my first love. I love living in this country. I love the food. I love the people. I love our greenery. I love everything about this country. And it would be so nice to see our economy get boosted and for us to be able to benefit from living in our country and not have to go elsewhere for certain benefits. We're turning 68. Ghana, we are boomers, you understand? And it would be nice to see how old we are reflected in the way our country runs. So, happy birthday to a bad bee. Happy birthday to a bad bee, Ghana. I hope you get the much needed makeover that you deserve so you can show these people who you really are because you are a bad bee. You're a bad bee. You're just going through something right now. That's it. And if you get proper carers, there's no limit to what you will be able to do. We're on part two on the historical profile of my grandma, Comfort Asamoah. Last week we had part one and we talked about her earlier life, and now we are going to continue and talk about her political career and her life after politics. We're also going to talk about the other women MPs like Susanna Al Hassan, Sophia Doku, Lucy Enin, Mary Cranting, and Victoria Nyako. Let's get into part two of Comforter Samoa, the freedom fighting baddie. While attending rallies at the weekend with the ladies from her office, she was known to be a clear voice in the crowd, amplifying our need for independence with a deep understanding of the benefits of Pan Africanism and the Marxist ideals Nkrumah stood by. Comfort had no idea she'd been noticed by Kwame Nkrumah for her loud, assertive presence. At midnight on the 6th of March 1957, after a span of 10 years, Ghana was declared independent by Nkrumah.
Ghana, your beloved country is free forever.
He bellowed as the flag we have all come to love and look on with pride was hoisted. The flag was designed by Mrs. Theodosia Salome Oko, a teacher and artist. Her inspiration for using the colors were red to represent the blood spilled to gain independence, green for our rich vegetation and location in the tropics, and gold to represent the country's natural wealth in minerals. The Workers' Brigade was set up by Nkrumah in 1957 to create jobs for the Ghanaian youth. There was one in every region, and citizens who enrolled were trained in different fields of work. Comfort became a commander in the Ashanti Region's faction. Sometime during this period, Akelona Akumi, Crown Counsel in Kumasi at the time, was introduced to her by her aunt while they'd gone grocery shopping. They began dating in what is described as a hot, torrid romance, living with one another in his apartment in Kumasi. They became pregnant with her new firstborn daughter, Omolara Akumi. On June 16, 1960, the Representation of the People Women's Bill was passed, and 10 women were elected to represent each region in Ghana as members of parliament on June 27th. Comforter Samoa for the Ashanti region, Susanna Al Hassan, Ayanori Bukari and Victoria Nyako for the Northern region, Grace Ayensu and Christina Wilmot for the Western region, Sophia Doku and Mary Cranting for the Eastern region, Regina Asamani for the Volta region, and Lucy Enin for the Brongahafu region. Ghana made history as the first ever full fledged republic, electing women to parliament to be an integral part of the legislative and administrative machinery of the new republic. Comfort was handpicked by Nkrumah on account of her booming personality on the occasions he'd encountered her at rallies and her work with the Workers' Brigade. When she was approached by Kroboy Duse, who had been asked by the president to fetch her, she expressed her fears to him, nervous, feeling she might not be able to take on the role. They went on her first ever flight to Accra. Her fears heightened even further. She heard her name being called on the radio as she walked into the office of the president and was assured by Nkrumah and others who'd seen what she was capable of that she was up to the task. Of course, this was met with slight resistance from their male counterparts. The day the women took their seats in the first session, Victor Owusu, an opposition member of parliament for Agona Kwabre, made a comment about the women being a sprinkling of lipstick and pancaked faces of doubtful utility to the deliberations of the House. Words he was later made to withdraw. Nothing much has changed, eh? Comfort was in no way fazed by snide remarks and insinuations made about what it meant for women to be represented in Parliament. She was known as a spirited advocate for policies that empowered women and children, championing for women to be recruited into the officer corps of the police force through the Police Staff College, and participated in the debate on the Maintenance of Children's Bill. She was also focused heavily on ones that furthered Ghana's economic progress. After a motion to place on record the House's appreciation of the West African Cocoa Research Institute, WACRI, was moved in Parliament in February 1962, Comfort made a remarkable input, stating this: I have the greatest pleasure in supporting the motion before the House. We all agree with the statements made on the excellent work being done by WACRI. Many vital experiments are carried out in this institute, which are of general interest to Africa, both economically and socially. We women in Ghana are proud of this institute, since the economy of Ghana is dependent to some extent to the successful results of its experiments. Ghanaian women should be encouraged to learn the scientific aspects of the institute. We must congratulate the workers of this institute and urge them to continue their useful services to the country. They must be consoled by the fact that Mother Ghana is always proud of them, and went on to support the motion. She had two children in 1962 and 63, respectively, Nako Doreen and John Kofi Tetegan, Nako in Accra and John in Kumasi. Their father, John Kofi Barko Tetegan, worked as General Secretary of the Gold Coast Trade Unions Congress, TUC. They'd met at one of Nkrumah's rallies, and by that time, the romance with Akelono had slowly fizzled out, and they'd parted ways as lovers, but remained very good friends. The women traveled extensively with the president, representing Ghana in many different foreign expeditions as presidential aides. Comfort was with the delegation that met the Kaiser Group in the United States, which set up Valco, and was part of the negotiation for the Akosombo Dam. She was also on the board of directors for Ghana Airways. In 1965, the first parliament term came to an end and new members were nominated. A shift was made from representing administrative regions to constituencies. Comfort stood for Setra West and won in a landslide victory, becoming the member of parliament for the constituency. She served diligently, focusing on education and the preservation of natural resources of the area. On the 24th of February 1966, while Nkrumah was on a peace mission in Vietnam, a coup d'etat led by Colonel Emmanuel Kwesi Kotoka, Major Akwesi Amankwa Efrifa, retired Lieutenant General Joseph Arthur Ankara, and Police Inspector General John Willie Kofi Harley, backed by other foreign bodies that needed Nkrumah out of office, took place. Gunshots rang out in the air, and fearful Ghanaians hid in their homes as broadcasts were made, stating Kwame Nkrumah is overthrown and the myth surrounding him is broken. On the day when Comfort heard the gunshots, she asked all the children in the house to hide under their beds, and she was taken from her home, terrified of what was to come. She was arrested and put in what was called protective custody for 6 months at Asha Fort. A commission was set up to investigate assets accumulated by senior public servants and political leaders called the Jaggi Commission, chaired by Justice Annie Jaggi. The commission counted all assets, including their clothes and even charcoal. Comfort's properties were seized, though acquired legally. She shared a cell with Susanna Al Hassan, becoming close friends. They were served food that was barely edible, and most of the women refused to eat. But Comfort encouraged them in order for them to keep their strength up and not fall ill. The 6 months were grueling for her, being separated from her family. When Comfort was released, after investigations turned up no corruption on her part, she went about putting her life together. Her children, who had been living with their father's families, came back to live with her. John and Nako's father, Mr. Tetagan, wasn't initially arrested as he was needed to keep the TUC workers on board, but ended up in exile because he condemned the coup once he left Ghana. This left Comfort a single mother with 3 children to raise. Luckily, she had the help of her sister Abna Nyako, who also had 2 daughters of her own. Also living with them were her sisters and brother, Mercy, Margaret, and Kojo Menu. She met her fourth child, Robert Osei Entry's father, Joseph Osei Entry, a major in the Ghana Air Force shortly after, leaving with her children to live in England when he was sent to study in Cranwell. They got married there, and she decided to use that period to improve her cooking skills and needlework, buying lots of patterns to sew at home and enrolling in a cordon bleu class. They lived there for 4 years, and Robert was born in 1972. Upon their return to Ghana, Robert's father, who had now become a colonel, died 6 weeks later in a horrible car accident with Comfort and a friend of his called Dominic. Comfort was the only survivor. They moved to Adabraka while Comfort pieced her life back together again. She started trading fish at the Tema Harbor and later opened a restaurant called Conicom's Enterprise in Trade Fair, where her sister Abna Nyako helped run the business. She was given back her cantonment house by the government, and she managed to acquire other properties that she rented out. She was then able to buy teak and cocoa farms. Her path with spirituality began at this point, and she began to seek God through religion. Her curiosity and truth seeking wasn't fulfilled until she had an encounter with the spiritual teachings of Sri Satya Sai Baba. She took trips to Puttapati in India to see him. When he met her, he was blown away by her spirit and would give her manifested gifts for protection and health. He became her spiritual teacher, and his teachings impacted her and changed her view on life. She opened a library in her house in Kwadaso Estates in Kumasi, free for all to borrow spiritual and educational books she enjoyed reading. She also sat and talked with people who would come, spreading the teachings she'd learned from Baba. In 1991, the Mampong Hene decided to elevate the Benin stool of Dikro to Hene, and she went from one of the Oba pennies to Queen Mother of Benin in a ceremony held in Mampong. The night prior, she was taken to a secret location and unveiled at the ceremony. There, she swore an oath of allegiance to Mampong Hema. Talcum powder was thrown on her in celebration, and she was paraded around the town in a palanquin. She served Mampong and Benin wholeheartedly. She was fascinated by the traditions of her people and was keen to preserve and uplift them any way she could. She loved them, and they revered her. When the chief of Benin was absent for some years, she played both roles of chief and queen mother, until her son, John, decided to step in and help her with what was becoming a big load. She was capable, but the help was welcome. She continued to serve her community until she fell ill after one Akweside, where she went to represent the new Mampong Hema. Comfort had a stroke upon her return to Kumasi and was admitted to the Okomfuanoche Teaching Hospital. Her children, devastated, rushed from Accra to see her, and later brought her back with them. She never fully recovered, and when her condition got worse, she was sent to London in hopes of better medical care, but passed away a few months after at the Royal Free Hospital in Hampstead on the 18th of October 2004. Her funeral was held in Benin, where she was mourned by thousands of her subjects, family, and friends who loved and respected her. Comfort's legacy is undeniable. She was beautiful, intelligent, endearing, while being a commanding figure. A woman who rose to the occasion even when she was unsure she could. Her light shone everywhere she went. She had a star power and a presence that is still felt by all who knew her to this day. The love she showed the world was returned to her in full, and she will go down in history as a woman of the people. My grandma was a special lady, truly. She really was. In the first part, I talked about the year that I lived with her in Kumasi and how we bonded over food. Like we would do food experiments, and she taught me to cook and just fashion and stuff. I remember she's the person who bought me my first crop top. I was so impressed. I was like, "Oh my god, you're a baddie!" And just like how she would talk to you and take care of you. Like she never ever liked putting people down. She always uplifted anybody that she was around. Like you couldn't gossip with her. Like her motto was, if you know that you can't keep it to yourself, don't tell me, because me too, I'll tell somebody. And that was a way to curb people from talking about other people to her. She did everything, like she did everything with such panache and flavor and spice. Like she was a real baddie. Like I don't just say she was a baddie because she was a real baddie, and I found so much more love and respect for her with the research that I had to do about her, and it's just made me feel very connected to her. And I DNA, man, DNA. Like her DNA runs through and through in my body, and I am so proud of her and like her law. We're gonna move on to some of the other women MPs who were friends of hers, but just in general, their contributions, their forward-thinking contributions, stood out to me. We'll start with Susanna Al Hassan. She was one of the three women chosen to represent the Northern region to the National Assembly. She was known as a formidable debater and was never deterred by the jeering and taunts from her male counterparts. She had profound knowledge on the educational and social problems in the country due to her being the first headmistress of the Bolgatanga Middle Girls School in 1955. She taught in Koforidria and Bekwai on account of her husband Edmond Alhassan being transferred to those places. He died regrettably in 1959, leaving her a single mother to four children. She asked to be transferred back to Bolgatanga after the incident, being reinstated as the headmistress for the Bolgatanga Middle Girls School. She was asked by Ebenezer Adam to join the newly formed faction of the CPP in Tamale in 1960, and she joined, being encouraged by the promise to address the underdeveloped conditions in the northern region. She was a civil servant of the CPP at the time, barred from active involvement in politics. On a visit by Nkrumah to the upper region, he expressed his admiration for her understanding of the problems that the North faced, hence her appointment to represent the North in Parliament coming as no surprise. She found the biggest problem the children faced was the irrelevance of the literature books they were using. In a bid to change this, she wrote books that reflected our cultural heritage. Asana and the Magic Calabash and Isa and Amina are two books she wrote. She was the first woman in Ghana to become a minister in October 1961 when she was appointed Deputy Minister of Education. She made history again in 1965, becoming the Minister of Social Welfare and Community Development. She also helped set up government vocational institutions. After being thrown in prison during the 1966 coup, she came out of prison and became a businesswoman, but was soon back in public office in 1972, being appointed as advisor to the National Redemption on Girls Vocation Training in Ghana. In June 1985, she became a member of the PNDC, the Provisional National Defense Council. When the country returned to constitutional rule in 1993, she became a member of the Fourth Republican Council of State, where she presented memoranda on national issues such as the unemployment issue. She was a force to be reckoned with until she took her last breath on January 17th, 1997. Another side note that was made by my mom was that she was very present when it came to talking to children. You know how sometimes adults can be dismissive when they're talking to you. It's just like, how are you? But like they're not really connecting with you. My mom said that every time she spoke to her, she felt seen because she was somebody who was very present when she was speaking to you, and that presence and that being and being present like that also extended to children. And I find that people who are like that are the best kind of people that you will ever meet, because children are not as dumb as our society tries to make it out. They are not as, like, oh, what does it she's a child, what does she have to add to the situation? So I found that point that my mom made to be a plus. We're going to move on to Sophia Doku. Sophia Doku was one of the first executive members of the UGCC, joining the party in 1947 along with Paul Tego and J.K. Tamaklo. When Nkrumah broke away from the party in 1949, she chose to sacrifice her position in the party because of her belief in him and his qualities as a dedicated leader. She became a clerk in the CPP office working without pay. She was also amongst the women activists who took part in campaigning for positive action. When Nkrumah and other CPP leaders were arrested, she and other women organizers in the CPP, i.e., Hannah Kujo, Ardria Ankra, and Ekia Asabia Ayisi, amongst others, organized rallies throughout the country demanding their release. At one of the rallies in Kumasi, a woman who'd adopted the name Ama Nkrumah got on stage and slashed her face with a razor, smearing blood over her body, and demanded the men do the same to show no sacrifice was too great in their united struggle for freedom. Like, huh. Sophia fought bravely alongside Nkrumah, Bedema, and Butsio during the struggle for independence. Once independence had been gained, she became the first matron of the Workers' Brigade, and her tenure there is said to have produced the first women commercial and heavy truck drivers. In 1960, she organized the women's wing of the CPP. She represented the Eastern region in Parliament, her focus being women's issues, mainly education and employment. She was also appointed chairman of the State Laundry Corporation, being removed by the 66 coup. She was arrested and released 5 months later. Madame Doku was directly involved in the resurrection of the CPP. When the PNP was formed in 1979, she was named Mother of the Party until their overthrow in 1981. She passed away on the 10th of October, 1991. A side note on her is how she encouraged the women who were in parliament and treated them like sisters. Next is Lucy Enimwa Enin, who was a member of parliament representing the Brongahafu region, the youngest member of parliament, entering parliament at the age of 21. In 1965, she represented the Bicham constituency. She held an interest in the health sector, bringing to light challenges nurses faced in hospitals. In 1966, when the Nkrumah government was overthrown, she was imprisoned for 8 months while pregnant. Even after the coup, she stayed closely involved with the CPP. In 2019, she petitioned the government to review the 1992 constitution. She said, "What we require is a bold and unfettered attempt to rewrite the constitution to accord with our national aspiration and the dreams of our fearless forefathers by removing the needless indemnity clauses seeking to protect certain people." Madame Enin said it was time for the country to review the 1992 constitution to address its flaws, especially its support of military coup d'etat dictates and decrees of the National Liberation Council. She is the last surviving woman MP from Nkrumah's government. These next two women don't have as much information out there as I would wish that they had. So these two are going to be very brief, and they're about Mary Cranting and Victoria Nyako. Mary Cranting was the second member for the Eastern Region. In 1965, she was made a member of parliament for the Swedru Achiase constituency. During her tenure, she voiced the need for more roads to be constructed in rural regions as it was where farmers who'd been helping with the development of the nation resided, and reiterated that providing them with the necessary mobility for their work would encourage them to continue to help the country. She also spoke to the unfairness of young women who fell prey to sexual coercion by men in better financial positions. She understood those dynamics in a time where I don't think a lot of people did. You know, that women who were in lower positions than men being preyed upon by them was wrong. She understood that. She didn't blame the women, which is something that we still see today. Last but not least, Victoria Nyako. She was the third member for the Northern Region from 1960 to 1965. She also held a post as Assistant Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She backed the Maintenance of Children Bill in Parliament, expressing that women had suffered at the hands of men and men needed to be more responsible for their children and be more present in the raising of them. These women were phenomenal in their different ways, and they revolutionized women's roles in politics in this country. The first to do it. Ghana, happy birthday one more time. Why? Happy birthday. Like I said, I really hope you get the makeover that you deserve, so you can show yourself show these people who you really are. We have so much potential, and it would be sad to continue to just have so much potential and not actually have that potential actualized and gained from, benefited from. So happy birthday, Ghana. Happy birthday to everybody who's celebrating in the diaspora, here at home. Maybe we're gonna go out, dance a little bit, say yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know, maybe some cult pop kakra. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. You better they be see. You better they be see. But wherever you're going to be, I hope you have an amazing time. We've come to the end of another episode of the Choo Choo Blema Sunny podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. We will be bringing you episodes bi-weekly on Wednesdays. You can catch the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or Patreon. Like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you so much. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at TBS Daily _ AFT, or email us at chuchublemasane@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any other versions of the stories you hear on here, or just any other thoughts you have. And you can also send in your original short stories, and they will be featured on the pod. Last week we got a story in from someone called the Black Pen, and it was a really, really, really cool story. I really enjoyed it. And so I'm looking forward to seeing more stories from you guys that we can feature on the pod. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about Kweku Anansi's Law, his origin story. And I can't wait to get into that one with you. It's a humorous tale with many twists. And of course, as usual, I'll be giving my own version of the story as well as the original. The show is produced by Nikita Kowalski. The stories are collected, researched, written, and read by me, Kabuki Akumi. Show music is by Andre Ayete, and the orators of today's historical profile are Omalara Akumi, Doreen Nako Tetegan, and John Tetegan. Also, I want to give a shout out to Aisha at Archives for helping me with the other women MPs. Thank you for listening. Until next time, Tree Blow. Take it easy. This has been the Chuchu Blema Sunny podcast, sharing truly African stories.